So we're going to get into the public works section, and we're going to start. Thank you, Chris, for coming back and kind of running through this. You did present initially quite a bit of information. I think they've had some time to digest some of that, so this will be somewhat of a review, but you did a great job last time, so we're looking forward to having you back and appreciate your time on this Saturday.
No, my pleasure, my pleasure. All right. And is there a way you can give me a control so I can control the screen? Is that possible?
I wasn't sure. Hold on. Yeah, if you're one, let me, I will make you the presenter. That'd be awesome.
Perfect.
You should have it.
All righty. It's trying on my end. Here we go. There we go. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Perfect. Well, again, Mayor and Council, Chris Eckert with NewGen Strategies and Solutions. It is a pleasure to be with you today. In working with city staff, we've gone through and we've tried to condense some of the information in this presentation. As Cynthia said, the goal today is just to refresh the discussion on the water and wastewater rate study. We've also gone in and we've worked with both Kimley Horn, your engineer, as well as city staff to try and retool the numbers where possible to see if we could reduce some of the near-term rate impact. And so some of the numbers you see today will be less than what you've seen previously, but there still is a need for rate action, and we will talk about that as we go through the presentation today. So as I said before when I was with you, you need to remember that as we talk about water and sewer utilities, you're not just a city council. You are the board of directors of a business. When you look at how we track water and sewer within the city's books and records, within the audited financial statements, it is an enterprise fund or a proprietary fund. Those are only used for a business type activity of government. And when you think about a business, while you're a nonprofit business, for a business to be successful, revenues must still match or slightly exceed expenses. If expenses are greater than revenue, then you are underwater, you are financially insolvent. And so it's critical when we're looking at pricing for water and wastewater service, we look at those expenses and make sure that our revenues are sufficient. And that's really what we're looking at, is the overall sufficiency of the revenue stream. As I mentioned before, I get asked by every city council I'm in front of how we compare to our neighbors. And that's the slide you see on the screen right now. This is comparing the minimum bill for water and sewer service. Now, your minimum bill includes 2,000 gallons of service. Other cities may include 1,000 gallons. Some may include no gallons. Also, every community is different. You have different water sources, different wastewater treatment methods. And so when you look at this, you have to remember this is not an apples to apples comparison. You have to do what's right for your community, regardless of what other communities are doing. Now, that being said, as we look at the regional comparison, one thing that strikes me here is how low your wastewater bill is, your sewer bill. You are $7 lower than the next lowest provider, which in this case is the city of Justin. When we see impacts like this, when we start to see graphs that look like this, this tells us that rate action is warranted because you are behind. Another element that this kind of begins to inform for us is, and we've seen this out in the numbers, your water rates right now are sufficient, your wastewater rates are not. That is not an uncommon event. We see that with a number of communities because citizens tend to understand paying for water as a commodity versus paying for wastewater. Many citizens don't understand the cost that goes into treating wastewater and dealing with wastewater. So again, this is not uncommon, but it does inform an action that is needed on the behalf of the city. So again, the slide here was the minimum bill. The next slide is a comparison at 5,000 gallons of service. We use 5,000 gallons as that's very common for a single family home to use 5,000 gallons of service every month. You can see you're still at, towards the bottom of this comparison, particularly as we look at that sewer bill. For 5,000 gallons of service, you're at $18.89. The next lowest provider here on sewer only is Reno at $27. So again, there's a big discrepancy where you are in sewer as compared to other communities.
Chris?
Yes, sir.
Would you go back? Thank you. When I was living in Fort Worth, my water sewer bill was in the $30 to $40 range.
Yes, sir.
Each month. Now, is that because that Fort Worth just has this huge scale of efficiency that we can't meet?
That is a vast majority of it. There's two things there. One, it's efficiency. When you think about utilities, utilities are very capital intensive businesses. And so you have to put a lot of money into infrastructure. The more people you have, the more you can spread the cost of that infrastructure out. And you also have to think about utilities. You have regulatory requirements that you have to meet. Those regulatory requirements are set by a third party. They're set by the state. And regardless of the size of your community, you have to meet those requirements. And so the bigger your community, the larger you are, there's some scaling that happens there. You begin to reduce the unit cost impact to citizens because you have more people to spread that cost over. The other element of Fort Worth that you need to be aware of, they have a lot of customer communities that they serve. They provide wholesale service to a large area surrounding Fort Worth. All of those individuals also contribute into the infrastructure cost. And so it really does become an efficiency issue, how many people you're serving, and you can lower that unit cost per customer.
Thank you very much.
Okay. But that is a great point as we transition into what are the issues facing your business. One of those issues is capital improvements. You have capital improvements that are needed both to meet existing deficiencies as well as to meet future needs. You have growth coming. As you look at that infrastructure need, that's driven, as I said, by the state. That's non-optional. Never before has the EPA told a community you don't have to comply with the Drinking Water Act or the Clean Water Act because it's unaffordable or because it's expensive. You have to comply. If you choose not to comply, what those regulatory agencies will do is they will fine you and then force you to comply. So there's really no way around this when we're looking at capital. We need to make investment in our system. Not making investment is just going to cost us more in the long run. Also, the size of your community, as we look at that, we come back to that unit cost discussion. The unit cost will be higher until the community grows, until we can spread that cost out over more customers. So the capital improvements, that also ties into growth and economic development. If we don't have the infrastructure in place to meet the commercial or industrial demand that's coming, we won't be able to grow. We won't be able to add to the number of individuals that are paying for infrastructure. So we can't get to that that base where we can lower that unit cost per customer. So as we think about capital improvements, as we think about investment, it's not just tied to growth, it's also associated with economic development. At the same time, as we talked about last time, you have some significant O&M needs in terms of equipment, personnel. We have some very old equipment that, frankly, I'm honestly surprised it's still running in certain cases. Sean can talk to this much more than I can, and I'm sure he will as he talks about his departmental priorities. but we have some needs that have not been met. We have, for lack of a better term, we've kicked the can down the road. We've stretched that O&M out as far and as long as we can. The more we defer maintenance and operations expense on the system, the more we defer those equipment purchases, that just leads to higher cost in terms of overtime for repairs. It leads to downtime for equipment. And so while you look at this investment, you're like, do we really need to spend that money? It could be costing you more in the long term by not spending money, not maintaining your system, not replacing equipment, not making the capital investment that's needed. So you really have to balance the spending with the not spending. We want to maintain affordable service, but at the same time, we have some needs for our utility at this time. We have talked about previously the impact of future water supply. That is longer term. That's not in our numbers today. But as a business, you need to be looking longer term. Where is your water going to come from? What is the impact of that? Again, that's a little bit further into the future. As we look at the capital improvements, the numbers you see on the screen right now, we are anticipating we'll be able to fund some of that capital with impact fees, but impact fees are not a majority funding source. There are some projects that we cannot fund with impact fees because of state law. And so you see we do have an estimated projected debt issuance coming online in 2022 of almost $3 million. Now, in our figures, we're not anticipating that the first payment would come due till 2023. So we're trying to stretch that out, but we need to be looking to how to fund that capital. We need to start looking at that debt issuance. How are we going to fund that so we can execute on these needed capital projects? With regards to O&M, we call this new program O&M because it's things that we're not doing right now. We have equipment needs, we have personnel needs. You can see those detailed in numbers on the screen. And again, Sean's going to speak to these more as he talks about his departmental priorities. But ultimately, we're looking $306,000 is a number that we need to fund equipment and personnel into next fiscal year. You'll note that begins to moderate. We've tried to spread this out where we can. We've tried to phase this in over the years where we can. But again, some of these things have been needed for a long time, and it's time to take action. So we talked about this previously, some scenarios to look at. If we did nothing, are our rates sufficient right now? Yes. We could probably limp along another year without a rate increase if we didn't do anything, if we didn't fund capital investment, if we didn't make the O&M expenses and spend the money that we need to. Could we limp along? Possibly. But again, that's just going to raise our cost in the longer term. On the capital side, as I said before, we talked about a almost $3 million debt issuance next year. That really wouldn't come due until 2023, so we could probably get away with a fairly minor increase under scenario 2 if we're just going to look at capital. But right now, that's not sufficient. Our O&M needs are really what's driving the need for rate action. When I was with you last time, when we were looking at all-in needs, looking at everything, I think we had the customer impact up to I believe it was close to $60. We've been able to moderate that. We've got that customer impact down to $30.54. But I'll emphasize to you, that's a monthly impact. We understand that's a big number. But because of the delays, because of where we are, those are the needs that are reflected today. Because of the needs you have, that is the customer impact of those needs as we go forward. In talking with Cynthia and talking with Sean, they are endorsing scenario 4, but we understand there is an impact to that to customers. And so I want to back up and go back to our regional comparison, looking at that minimum bill. Under scenario 4, currently just a minimum bill customer, 2,000 gallons of service, that monthly bill is $45.31. If we did what we need to do, that would raise that monthly bill to $63.10. Again, that is a significant jump, and we recognize that. As we look at the 5,000 gallon bill, the average bill, it would take it from 77.29 to 107.83. Again, a big jump, but there are providers out there that are higher than that right now. Springtown is higher than that, and I'm sure there are other communities further out in the state that we could find that look at that. But again, I do want to point out within this, we're not raising the water bill. The water bill is sufficient. It's the wastewater bill that is the issue. As you look at this wastewater comparison here, at 5,000 gallons, the bill would be $49.43 for sewer only. That's the green bar. And you can see that's not too far out of line where other providers of sewer service are at this time. So again, big numbers. I understand that big impact. While staff is recommending scenario 4, that is what is needed to meet our critical business needs. What we are looking for as we go into the budget for fiscal year 22 is council direction. What needs should we fund? Not what needs can we fund? Remembering that anything that we push off into the future just raises our long-term cost. As I look at rate action right now, I would say action on your sewer rates is warranted today. We're not posted for action. We're not looking for that. But as I said before, you're $7 lower than the lowest minimum bill as we look at neighboring communities. You are out of line in terms of sewer service. At minimum, I would recommend some type of rate adjustment coming this October, commensurate with the adoption of the fiscal year 22 budget. So I think that's about as far as we can push this in terms of rate action.
Chris?
I'd also remind you as the board of directors, this is not a one-time activity. You need to be looking at pricing for utility service regularly. We recommend that you push that off no later than summer of 22. Be looking at rates again, see where you are, making sure that your plan is sufficient.
Chris?
Yes, sir.
Actually, this is a question for you and for Cynthia. When Chris says immediate adjustment to wastewater rates is warranted, does that mean immediate is this an agenda item on this coming Thursday's council meeting?
It is not right now because I'm waiting for council direction. Now, if that's something that council wants to consider at the next meeting, we can certainly add that to the agenda.
Would you please add that? Because if it turns out we take no action, we take no action, but it will at least give us the option Thursday.
Oh, yep, we will add that to the agenda.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.